My guest on today's show is Michal Stawicki, a personal development and business coach based in Poland. He's the author of no less than 19 books around building good habits, personal development and growth. In the industry, he's known as Mr. Consistency, developing good habits to improve your life. That's what we're discussing today on Shifting Views with Willis. Okay, Michal, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on the podcast this morning.
Thank you for having me. That's a privilege.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here. Okay, I'm going to get straight into it. Why do habits matter? Why do good habits matter?
They matter because they are who we are, and that's how we identify ourselves. And often how we call ourselves is derived from what we are doing. A writer is writing, a singer is singing, a teacher is teaching, and so on and so on. We are our habits. So good habit matters because if you have more of good habits than bad habits, then your life is better than worse, rather.
And is it a conscious thing for you? I mean, is it a conscious thing to develop good habits, or is this something we kind of just we're naturally doing, just like we naturally develop bad habits and we naturally develop good habits? Do you need to consciously think about building a good routine?
Yeah, so I think that's the whole human experience. When you put your mind into the process, it's just better because then you can use your abstract thinking to actually improve your situation instead of just doing it by try and error. So you can do both. I mean, that's biology. We as mammals, as humans, we are wired for having habits. The structure in brain which stores them, basal ganglia, we share it with many other primitive creatures like frogs, snakes, reptiles, birds, and so on. So it's natural. It's a part of our biology. And it's true that bad habits are easier to acquire because they have. And why? Because they have this immediate feedback loop. Yeah. So you eat a chocolate and it feels yummy. Of course, it's easier to create such a habit than, puking your guts out because you've just trained it, have intensive intervals for 5 minutes. Yeah. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's the difference between. And so I would say it's natural, it's biology, habits, but good or bad habits, well, that's a bit of philosophy here. What are the good and bad habits? And my rule of thumb is, does it serve you in 10 years? Yeah, even if you are just starting out, whether it's good or bad habit, you can extrapolate a decade in the future and say, okay, it will have specific influence on my life, and it will be either positive or negative.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I really like what you're saying there, because I suppose with bad habits, typically the response, the feeling that you get from doing those bad habits is a little bit, it's more instantaneous. It happens quicker. So, eating, as you say, eating chocolate, smoking a cigarette, drinking alcohol, whatever. There's that dopamine burst usually off the back of it. Or maybe that burst is a moment of exhilaration or something like that. But usually with a good habit, it takes time to develop it, and it usually requires some form of discipline to be consistent. So, going to the gym or something is a good habit. But, I can speak for the many when I say it's hard work to get into that routine. So, it's easier to avoid them, basically. But I think your comment there of saying, determining whether the habits are good or whether the habits are bad, if you can look 10 years forward and say, does this serve me in 10 years? How will this affect me? That's a wonderful way of looking at it. And I suppose we all need to consciously do that more.
I guess this is my personal development study here. We need to do everything more consciously, because then we are getting better. Like, it's not that our biology is that bad, that our brain wiring is bad. It's just maybe not so um, fitting our current lifestyle, modern
Sure.
lifestyle. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I would say we are much more forced to use our conscious brain to improve our lives than
Yeah.
our ancestors, like even 100 years ago. And
Sure.
500 years ago, yeah, those wiring was pretty good for everything. Now it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, it sounds like to me, I mean, with the advent of kind of the industrial revolution, the technological revolution, the consumerism world that we live in, all of this stuff that's grown and grown and grown, I suppose that's created more and more barriers that involves us having to think even more and almost go against our natural instinct because we're living in a world where we're having to adapt to such fast pace and such fast change. Do you think that's a factor that the world's evolved so much that the human instinct for what is good and what is bad in terms of habits is kind of being influenced by that?
It's too early to say, but my gut, everything I know about life and how we are operating says that uh, it's not just the advancement of technology, and it's so many factors
Yeah,
all together that it makes very difficult to operate how we are wired biologically. So
yeah,
yes, if you want to thrive, you need to use your conscious mind much more. Otherwise, you are left to your autopilot, and in this day and age, your autopilot won't serve you well. Like it's so easy to gain so many bad habits right now. And now, when you have on your mobile at your thumb the whole world, and you can do anything, yes, like
yeah.
all those mental addictions, gaming, pornography, or even just going down the YouTube hole for half a day. Yeah, it's
Doom
all
scrolling.
so easy now
Yeah,
that it's very easy to really succumb to those habits that really don't serve you well, and you actually need to turn your thinking more often to stay away from it and install like firewalls between them and you, so you can thrive, because otherwise you're doomed to failure. Like we know all about social media, that the single objective is for you to spend time there.
sure,
End
sure.
of story. Yeah. So
Yeah.
how that serves your life?
No, that's really interesting. And I really like your analogy there of installing firewalls, because I think, yeah, if you used to think of your brain as like a server or a computer system, and it's getting attacked with so much information all the time. And I've said this a few times that I think that we're overstimulated with stuff too often, media, news, threat alert, people are more stressed, people are more anxious, because we're just consumed with stuff. um and I suppose a good habit in that therefore would be to consciously cut some of that out or limit some of that or try and put some form of filter in place to try and reduce the impact on the brain, or or the computer, if you want to use that analogy. But of course, that's hard to do because then you're cutting off the dopamine and you feel like you're missing out in the big world. So it's a really interesting approach that you've got. So from your point of view, what is it that you think needs to be done? I mean, you're helping people do this. What are some of the key things that people can be doing to start really rewiring the way that they live their daily lives and develop good habits?
Before I answer this question, I will talk a bit about what the habit is, like how science is considering it. And it's a neural loop in our brain, which consists of like three elements: a trigger, a routine, and then endpoint. And so something triggers your behavior,
Yeah,
and then it finishes at some point. Um, and that's a habit loop. So having that knowledge, you can design your good habits.
yeah,
Um, and I would say trigger is the most important thing. So if you
sure.
want to have a habit, something which is consistently repeated, something which is actually stored in your very primal part of the brain, you need, because our brain is also very good in pattern recognition. Yeah, so you need to give it a pattern so it can recognize it, then it will save it in your brain. So it's very good idea to do your habit at the same time in the day, in the same place, like going through the same motions. Then it's easy for your brain to recognize that, okay, that is the pattern. So instead of diving into it fully with our conscious mind, we can just put it in the basal ganglia, in the like automatic routine, and
it comes naturally.
It's automatic. Exactly.
Yeah.
So trigger, like the same things, but also like the most reliable trigger, which I know and very few people know because they are not habit experts. It's just finishing something you habitually do. So, for example, I always had a habit of taking off my shoes when I get at home, because this is what my mother beaten into me when I was like 5 years old. And then I have a starting point. I'm going back from the outside world to my home, and I'm putting off my shoes. What's next? Yeah, and then you can introduce something, treat it as your trigger, and okay, maybe I will hang my keys on the wall. Yeah, so I will never look for them again, and so on and so on. So among successful people, the morning routine is very like established and known. Why? One, because it's like the most reliable habit we have. Every day we wake up, and it's a trigger to do something else, and on top of that you can do something else, and so on. And that's how the routine exists. But actually, every single habit you have now can be a trigger for another habit, and can be a building point for the whole stack of good habits.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I suppose just thinking back to some of the stuff you was just saying there, a lot of this is built from childhood and our influence from parents, and how, what's instilled in us. And you was just saying about taking your shoes off when you go into the house. And I do things like when I eat dinner, I always eat all of my vegetables first. It's just something I naturally do. I'd find it strange not to do that. And that's just because from being a child, that's just kind of what I did, and it's kind of stuck with me. And there's probably 1,000 other examples that I can't think of right now, but I'm sure there are 1,000 other examples of that. So would you say it's prudent for parents or guardians, if they want their children to grow up and have successful, happy lives, they have a role to instill strong habits in them that they can take with them through to adulthood?
Absolutely. This is what parenting is in the nutshell. Like brushing your teeth. It was, again, forced on me when I was small. And and I wasn't very diligent about that till I got my first teeth ache. And, oh, thank you, no more. And I was very consistent since then. With that, but it applies to everything. One of my mentors is Brian Buffini, and he has 6 kids, and he and his wife, they introduce really, they force their kids to say hello, thank you, and so on. So they are polite, like
sure
human beings should be. But because they did it, they actually are like that. And Brian many times said on his podcast, like people in restaurants or in airlines, commenting like, your kids are so polite, so nice, they save. Like, it's not a normal thing anymore. So if you instill this in your kids, they will have the advantage.
Michal, I'm going to go slightly off tangent here just a little bit, but just for sort of a couple of seconds. In terms of the world that we're in now, there's lots of troubles in the world, in society, crime and knives and drugs and all sorts of stuff. And it's all we hear about in the media and things like that. But I just wonder, in terms of people making bad decisions to do bad things, is that a reflection of habits? Does habits play a role in informing how people become what they are?
Good habits are providing you good outputs. So if you started as a kiddo, then you are a teenager in this rebellious time, and you already have, the history of a decade of making good choices.
Yeah.
It's definitely easier to stick with them.
Yeah.
So I'm an example of a person who had a full house, mother and father, and they raised me traditionally. So when I got to the age of a rebellious youngster, like my crazies were much, more
Yeah.
stabilized than my peers, for example. Yeah. So
Sure.
it's I think you are onto something here.
Okay, so let's get into the area that you're into then. So you're a personal development and a business coach. How do we make the link between being successful in business and having good habits? How do the two correlate?
Directly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's think of, for example, like very, very broad time management. Like, who is a better entrepreneur? Of course, the one who leverages his time better. Uh, and bam, and you can have good habits around your time management, actually using your calendar or tracking your tasks. And those habits in the long run will make a tremendous difference between, a person with those habits and without them.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm coaching solopreneurs. So people starting their businesses or, early in the business history, maybe with very small team. In that stage, everything depends on the founder, on the owner, and like his habits is his capital.
Yeah.
Because it's a totally different game if you have to train someone in like basics of time management
Yeah.
versus to train someone in basis of financial management versus marketing. And so if you have good habits when it comes to financials and time management, it's so much easier to become a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's having that core to build from, it sounds like to me, which is interesting. And I just wonder if do you think in terms of the key to success, and I use that word loosely, but the key to success, whatever that means for you, really comes down to those that have developed good habits and have consciously thought about the way that they live their life and they deliver their work, etc. And those that haven't are less likely to have success in the business world. Is that a fair statement?
If you don't know where you are going, so just on a treadmill, you will never get there to this success because it's not defined by you or it's just vague. So it's Jim Rohn saying it's hard to drift into the top of the mountain. So if you don't know where you are going, you will arrive there every time.
And I suppose it's the age-old line, isn't it? I mean, people have always said this, that good leadership, and whether that's running a business or being a manager or whatever it is, good leadership is really having a clear direction, a clear vision, and being able to take people along with you and kind of get them to buy into what you're doing and lead the way. It's captain of the ship, so to speak. And that's where you get to the destination. And I guess what you're about is trying to develop people so that they're in the position to be able to do that naturally, by having good habits, by being in a position of conscious awareness and being able to make decisions logically and all of that kind of stuff. And that's really what you're trying to do with the future business leaders, I'm guessing.
When I come into play, it's really serving them as a companion. So when you just articulate your thoughts aloud, you can sometimes notice how this is nonsense, or oh, that's actually a good idea. Why I never followed up with it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. If it's personal development or business coaching, it's like you need an external perspective really to shift your view. And first of all, to notice where you are, yeah, because usually our beliefs are in a way, and our beliefs are really how we see the world. So you need to see it a bit differently, noticing your beliefs and then changing them. This is really where like 80% of the coaching work happens.
Yeah.
But also, I'm of the opinion that accountability is really important. It's worth leveraging. We are social creatures, even the Atmos introverts. We are social animals, so accountability can make wonders. Just stating what I will do in the next week and then checking on that.
Yeah.
Maybe during the week, and at least once a week on a call. So that really takes your word from the word of declarations to the word of actions. And this is actually what uh, provides results in every area of life. Those are the actions. Yeah, they have some physical impact on the physical reality.
Sure.
So if I can keep you accountable to do something in the next week, you will reap the results. Some of them, maybe it will be a teaching experience, maybe it will be a concrete result. So, okay, I will reach out to 2 prospects every day. And then in a week, you reach out to 14, and maybe one of them will become your client, and it affected the bottom line.
There's a couple of points on there that I wanted to pick up on, and I think I absolutely agree with you, and I think they're so true. One is having that outside perspective. In my world, in consultancy world for innovation, the biggest thing we say to companies is you have to be able to think differently, and you need somebody else to see what you can't see because you're blinkered by your environment quite often, and it's hard to see. The old saying, it's hard to see the wood for the trees. You need somebody to see it from a completely fresh perspective. So I absolutely agree with that. But I also agree with the accountability element. And I suppose that's why people, for example, in fitness, why you might have a personal trainer or something like that, that really their job is to keep you doing it. They can show you things and teach you things, but fundamentally their job is to kind of keep you going to the gym. That's essentially. And when you feel accountable for something, there's almost an element of guilt in a way. You feel you need to deliver that
This is
because
what
that's
I
what you've
mean
committed
by
to.
we being social animals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's kind of like us doing this podcast, we've committed to this date to do this thing this morning. And whatever I'm doing otherwise, I feel, well, I need to go and do this podcast because that's what I've agreed to do. That's accountability, So not that that's a problem because I'm very much enjoying this podcast, but just as the example. And the final thing I wanted to pick up on, and you did touch upon it there, but I had a question around the domino effect when it comes to growth and whether good habits can cause a domino effect. So by doing things consistently over and over again, it trickles into other areas of your life or other areas of your business. And when you develop good habits in one area, you're likely to develop that into other areas, and that's going to lead to better things. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's a very fair statement. The habit loop concept came from just analyzing brain activity in rats. So I think it's a simplified when it comes to human beings, because this is what we could do, like break down and write down and state, okay, this is a habit. I think habits for human beings are more like a bundle. So we don't have just one loop. You have multiple loops, which are, within or just have some sticking points with each other. So yes, it works that way. If you develop a habit, good habit, then you are more likely to develop another habit, maybe in a different area. So 2 examples. In the book, The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg, he instanced some research scientists were interested how people change their lives. Yeah, and of
Yeah.
course, at the beginning, the hypothesis was like we all think, okay, some dramatic change, illness, death, changing jobs, and so on. Nope. In the end, they discovered it was changing a habit, and they
Yeah.
called it a keystone habit. So exactly one habit that when you start, then you start developing more good habits, just like spontaneously,
Mm.
spontaneously, and they in that book, Charles provides two examples of keystone habits: healthy eating and fitness activity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, by the way, they are like body based, which just makes sense. Yeah, we are so more biological than we love to state. Yeah, it's like,
Sure.
hey, mind is everything. Nope, not really. So that's one thing. And another is from my own experience. Uh, I have a habit of doing a series of push-ups in the morning. So I picked it when I was like 15, and then multiple times I just drop it and picked it again and drop it
Sure.
and so on.
Yeah.
And in 2006, I got back to it. And I've been doing it for several months. And then I also struggled with my morning prayer. Like it was inconsistent. I
Yeah.
wanted to pray, but well, it sometimes happened and sometimes not. Then I decided to like do a short prayer while I'm exercising. So it's like it was like a trigger, uh, and now it was like a miracle. Both practices became very, very, very solid,
Yeah.
consistent. I could count on my both hands days I missed both of the activities during the next decade. Yeah, so yeah, this is exactly the illustration how it works. You have one habit, then it makes sense to add another, and then like I build the whole morning ritual from my exercises, then just some meditation, reading, and so on and so on.
Mikhail, so what would you like listeners to take away from this, from your experience? Given what you do, you've written a lot of books around this area. You work with a lot of people, so you're experienced in this topic, and you obviously believe in its success, and it makes sense. Everything you say is very logical and makes sense to me. So if you're the audience member listening to this, perhaps you're an entrepreneur, perhaps you're starting a business, perhaps you're on a new journey. What's the key takeaway that they should think about?
It's a double takeaway. First is really what I started with, which habits are who we are. Like they are utmostly important. If anything should be important in your life, then that should be your habits. And the second thing, which we haven't touched, but it's really very common when it comes to developing good habits, we yeah touch upon that it's easier to get into bad habits than good ones.
Yeah.
So start very small, start easy. This is the key to habit development, because habit is something which is repetitive. So
Yeah.
you need to repeat it many times before it becomes a habit. If you are trying to, okay, I will phonetically register every minute of my waking time, it's hard to do. You will
Yeah.
probably fail.
Yeah.
But if your starting point is, okay, I will do one push up in the morning, like that's pretty easy. That's sustainable. And if you do it for 100 of mornings, then maybe you will do 10 or 100.
It applies to everything as well. I think if you're trying to, for example, if you're trying to grow a podcast, then a good habit would be to consistently record podcasts, and maybe you'll start small and as I did, and you'll record maybe one a week or something like that. And then slowly that grows into several a week, and it becomes much more of a routine of doing it. And it becomes part of your day. That's what I do. At this point in the day, I record a podcast, I speak to a guest. And by default, the consistency helps develop the product, if you like, and what's going out, because that's what you're doing. And it's strange because they say it all the time on things like social media and things like that. They say, okay, if you want to grow a profile on social media and this, that, and the other, the key to it is consistency. Everything always comes down to consistency. People that do things, then stop it, then start it, and stop it. You can't get any momentum in it. You've got to be consistent. And so I really like what you're saying about, look, start small. Take a small task, make that part of your make that part of your day, and then slowly it'll grow and it'll grow and it'll grow, and then you'll start adding other elements and creating a chain of things that happen. And I think that's really interesting. And it's, you know, what's funny about it is it's so obvious in a way, it's so logical, but it's really hard to think like that. It's really hard to get into that world. And I suppose that's why you exist. That's why you do what you do.
I suppose so.
Yeah, it's a nice, simple way of putting it. Michal, this has been so interesting. I've really enjoyed speaking to you because I just think everything you're saying makes perfect sense. If people want to reach out to you and get your support and talk to you about their habits and how they can improve their lives, where do they go?
Go to my blog, expandbeyondyourself.com. And it's nice to be a Polish guy in an English-speaking space. Write my name and add anything to that, books, blog, coaching, and probably I will be the first in the results.
Yeah, there's lots of books out. I've got 19 written down here, and you're all over the place. So if you look up Michal Stawicki, or go to expandbeyondyourself.com, you get all the support, all the help you need, and all the resources there. Michal, this has been so interesting. Thanks so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All the best.